Okay, it's mic'd up. So, good afternoon, everybody, and I appreciate you coming. I had this, I don't want to call it a fantasy, but I had this thought that the last brief on the last day, that it wouldn't be much of a turnout. But I appreciate those of you that are here and are interested in this portfolio, in this effort, and I'm often asked if what it means to be the number one priority for modernization. And in a practical sense, it means that we've gotten a lot of resources that have been turned our way to achieve the modernization goals. And then to take that another level, it also comes with the recognition that in order to do that, some very tough choices were made across the Army. And so the celebration of being the number one priority ends pretty quickly when you're sobered by the idea that now we've got to deliver, that our Army and our nation has invested a lot in this effort. And so I'm really relieved, being relatively new in this job, to have some really talented teammates, and these three are representative of a much larger organization that's spread out over about 5 different locations, and we'll get a chance for them to offer a few examples of what the efforts of the cross-functional team have delivered already, and then we'll keep all our remarks pretty short to turn this into more of a discussion and question and answer session. So the first thing I'll offer is that when I arrived out to Fort Sill about 2 months ago, one of the first things that I did was sit down with the Fires and Field Artillery Concepts team out of the Fire Center of Excellence. And I wanted to make sure that, one, I understood where the Army was going with multi-domain operations, but more importantly, to understand where we were going with long-range precision fires in the context of multi-domain operations, because we have to be nested, maybe more than any of the other CFT efforts. And the reason why I say that is because what we're doing answers the fundamental question of multi-domain operations, which is a question of access. And so our whole purpose is to enable the penetration and disintegration of enemy anti-access and aerial denial systems. We'll achieve that by developing systems that ensure overmatch in range and lethality at echelon, from strategic fires all the way to the tactical fires. At the strategic level, we're enabling the joint force, like I said, by penetrating and disintegrating the enemy A2AD network. And we'll do that with 2 systems. We're in support of the Space and Missile Defense Command's pursuit of the long-range hypersonic weapon, and we'll help by developing the operational concept. We'll help by doing all the .MLPF, sorry for the acronym, the .MLPF work, but essentially what we're going to do is make sure that when that weapon system is ready to go, that there are soldiers trained and ready, there's a mission command structure and fire control framework that's in place, so that as soon as it's ready and painted green, it's in the field, operated by U.S. Army soldiers, and it's achieving its deterrent effect immediately. The second half of the strategic portfolio involves the development of a technology demonstration of a strategic long-range cannon. And the reason for having these 2 systems is really pretty clear when you evaluate the target set of the A2AD systems. And what you realize that that's a mixture of very heavily defended, fortified, strategic infrastructure and C2 sites, as well as a combination of road mobile TELs, radars, and other lighter-skinned, more area targets. And so in order to achieve the disintegration and penetration effect that we'll achieve, we need to have a mix of effects. So exquisite, very expensive hypersonic missiles with tremendous kinetic effect on the strategic infrastructure and the hardened targets, and then a volume of more affordable cannon projectiles at those targets, the aspects of the target set that are lighter defended and more road mobile. So that's the framework for the strategic end of the portfolio, and I'll quickly move through the rest of it and turn it over to these gentlemen. But at the operational level, We're replacing ATACMS with a far more capable missile called the Precision Strike Missile. That's already a program of record that's moving along, and Chris Mills here will describe what we've done to accelerate that and pull it to the left. And so the CFT is really focused on the spirals. So we'll deliver an urgent material release of these missiles in late 2022, early 2023, and then immediately we need to begin to field the next the spirals that'll give us cross-domain capability, that'll give us loitering munition type capability, sensor fuse capability, and so that's really what the CFT, in terms of my focus on the PRISM missile, is about the spirals. And then lastly, at the tactical level, if in order to understand what they're doing, it might be easy to start with what we've got right now. So if you look at our current self-propelled howitzer with a 39 caliber length tube, 155 millimeter bore diameter, that's the current Paladin. And if you're here, you're probably aware of the PIM program that's going on right now, which is this chassis upgrade to the Paladin. So the IRCA program, if PIM is the chassis upgrade for Paladin, then IRCA is the turret upgrade for PIM. And so at the end of it, from the muzzle brake to the track pads, it's a new howitzer, probably featuring a much longer gun tube, a 58 caliber length tube, a redesigned chamber and breech that'll be able to withstand the gun pressures to get out to 70 kilometers of range. But the thing about IRCA is that maybe makes it more complicated than the others, is that it's as much about the ammunition as it is about the armament. We can't take our current family of projectiles and shoot them 70 kilometers. They're not designed for it. They won't withstand the board, those chamber pressures and others. So it involves building the next set of projectiles that'll get out to 70 kilometers and then far beyond. So that's what we're doing in the cross-functional team. Like I said, the T is really important because, like I said, we've got a lot in the portfolio, and we're working very closely. I feel as much like I'm on the RDECOM and RDEC and AMRDEC teams as much as I feel as these guys feel like they're on mine. So it's even as and I'm not just saying that because General Murray's here, but even as Army Futures Command is standing up, the ideas that it aspires to put into practice are really already happening. So that's kind of a fundamental theme in this effort for modernization, is we can't be sequential in our approach anymore. We have to work in parallel every chance. So we'll work development of prototypes at the same time we're reaching developing the technology demonstrator. So I'll now turn it over to Chris Mills. Each one of these guys will deliver sort of some practical examples of how we've started to move faster, and then we'll be happy to take any of your questions.
So good afternoon. I'm Colonel Chris Mills. I'm the PM for Precision Fires Rocket and Missile Systems. But today and most every day, my main duty is associated with being the missile rep for the cross-functional team for long-range precision fires. What I wanted to talk to you today was about the middle line of effort, which is operational fires. And that's focused on the Precision Strike Missile, which is an operational fires missile. One thing that confuses people a lot of the time is originally this missile was called the Long Range Precision Fires Missile. And there was some degree of confusion about that name, because there's a capability called the Long Range Precision Fires. There's a CFT called Long Range Precision Fires. So it was creating confusion. So leadership said we need to undo that confusion. So we changed the name to Precision Strike Missile, and you hear it referred to as PRISM. So PRISM's a surface-to-surface missile system. It's a replacement for ATACMS, but it's more than that. As Colonel Rafferty mentioned, it allows us the cross-domain maneuver that we need in an A2AD environment, suppression of enemy air defense, as well as gives us the standoff that we need. So this system is fired from existing launchers, the M270A1 tracked launcher, as well as the HIMARS wheeled launcher. And as far as the requirements and what we're looking at as far as the design, range is paramount in that A2AD environment, so we're focused on range. But it's not just range, it's about lethality, and probably just as much as it's important. In this design, we have 2 missiles per pod, so that essentially doubles your firing power per launcher and essentially per battalion. But it also reduces your logistical burden and your transportation burden for that system. And finally, how we link in with the CFT is in growth potential. This system will give you the growth potential to spiral in additional capabilities. And as Colonel Rafferty mentioned, what we're focused on is we're building the baseline missile right now, but we're already planning and working with the science and technology communities in order to spiral in future capabilities to address gaps and areas we want to focus our fires portfolio in. So the program started in earnest in 2017 with 2 contractors developing prototypes, and at this point the contractors are they're at a point where they're testing components. They've about finalized their designs, and we're looking at a flight test in less than a year now of the precision strike missile. There's several things that we've been focusing on with the contractors. One is to get the design right early, because we don't want to rush to failure. But then the second thing is accelerate at every opportunity. So as we go forward, we have as Colonel Rafferty mentioned, we're planning on a early operational capability in the FY23 timeframe, late calendar year 22. And then we're going to start looking at what can be done as far as additional capabilities. That's the third thing we've been telling the contractors. We need an open systems architecture, and we need to be able to have the size, weight, and power in the missile systems to spiral in additional capabilities. And so those capabilities can cover a gamut of capabilities, improved propulsion, improved navigation, especially in a GPS degraded or denied environment. It can include other payloads, seeker options that allow us to hit moving or moved targets, and then other warhead options, potentially against armor or potentially deploy ISR assets. So we're continuing to work with the S&T community, and we've talked with industry through over the last couple of days and over the last several months to understand the state of technology as far as spiraling in those capabilities. From my perspective, we're talking as far as successes and how the CFT has helped. It's been pretty significant in several ways. I'll say in one way the CFT has allowed us to accelerate the program, and they've done that by helping us align funding, not just for the baseline missile, but for science and technology to feed into the missile. It's also helped with requirements definition and getting requirements validated and out the door more quickly, because sometimes that process takes longer than it probably should. And finally, we've got test team members that are part of the CFT, and they've allowed us to do our testing more efficiently and not over-test the system. So those are kind of some success stories that, and the way I see the CFT has been a positive, to the PRISM program. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Will McDonough.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for coming out. Like Colonel Rafferty said, we thought this might have been a ghost town. by this point of time, and it's obviously not, but thanks for all of your interest. I do only plan on taking about 4 to 5 minutes and cover what we're doing with extended range cannon artillery, and then I'll turn it over to my partner in crime, Mike George here, who's also a Picatinny member. So yeah, I'm Will McDonough. I make the cannon ammunition. Our team makes the cannon ammunition, precision guidance kit, Excalibur, all the mortar systems that the Army employs, and then also the mortar ammo. And so I'm the ammo guy, and I'm pleased to be a part of the team. We make the propulsion systems, we make the propellant, and what that has highlighted for us is the interfaces, the technical interfaces are really important. But above all of that are the relationships between the different Army organizations that have historically just not delivered capability when it's needed. And I think it's just maybe my Catholic upbringing, but the sooner you confess for something, the sooner you can move past it and you agree that our success has not been high enough. Some will say that's like being a Jets fan. Like every year the Jets sit around and they're like, oh, we almost won the Super Bowl. No, you were nowhere close to winning the Super Bowl. So just accept that we've got some issues, and this has been an incredible forum for us to put the issues on the table, pin responsibility down, and move forward. Extended range cannon artillery, and Colonel Rafferty covered it. We've got a 39 caliber system right now. I like to turn that and say, no, we got a 39 caliber problem right now. I was a part of the Heavy Brigade Combat Team PM office when Paladin PIM became a real big priority. The Army accelerated it, and the Army's getting what it asked for several years ago. And it's going to be a viable platform that we can upgrade more capability on. The focus was on survivability. We were there and we invested tens of billions of dollars in survivability during OIF. And now we're investing a lot of money into lethality. We're going on the offensive. I'll highlight a couple of different programs that I think are innovative in the ways that we are getting after lethality. And then I'll turn it over to Mike George after a couple of comments on why Mike and I are on the same sheet. Two innovative products we're doing. XM1113 is the new replacement rocket-assisted projectile round. The fact is the Army came out of production of the 549A1 in 1989. We're 30 years after that point in time. 30 years is a long time. We're going to go back into production on a wrap round. It's going to have 20% more impulse than the wrap round had. And so I look at that and say, okay, wow, we've moved the bar 20% in 30 years. Obviously not acceptable, but we're going to get a 40-kilometer capability, and we've shot it out of the 58 caliber system, and we've put holes in the ground in Yuma out to 62 kilometers. And with the Yuma improvements that'll take place in the next FY, we'll put holes in the ground out to 70 kilometers. So one of the things that our leadership has been adamant about is don't talk about range. Show range, shoot range, and then you can talk about it. But if you haven't put a hole in the ground in the desert, don't advertise that you can go do it. And so we've shot Excalibur out to 62 kilometers, missed by 2 meters twice. A week ago Saturday, that's successful. We've shot the XM1113. We're going to continue to test the XM1113. We fired it about 51, 52 times. I'll highlight that point because the first 51 or 52 worked great, and then we had a projectile come apart in midair. In previous regimes of acquisition reform, this would have been a bad deal. It would have been a failure. It had been post-milestone B. We would have had a breach of the program. It would have been a failed program, or at least an ugly sight. No, we shot before MDD. We shot through the S&T program with the CFT support, with eyes on, before the material development decision. So I think this is an example of moving learning left. I don't think we can go too far further left, but we are definitely moving learning to the left. Okay, so the projectile comes apart in midair. Everyone looks at it. We figured out why. We go back in. We prove out that we've got that fixed. We had a great breakfast with a couple of companies yesterday that are going to go right into production. Some of those are not hard decisions. We have a contractor that runs Scranton, the Scranton Army Ammunition Plant. We're going to workload Scranton. We have a company that runs the Iowa LAP facility, the Lotus Level and Pack facility. They're going to LAP 1113. We've got a company that makes rocket grains, right? We used to have an entire Army ammunition plant, Joliet, used to make rocket grains and base bleeds. That got shut down, so the market for the rockets are pretty small, but they're turned on. And so yesterday, the contractors at the highest levels understand not only are we going to do 1113, but we're going to deliver it faster, and we're going to have precision guidance kit work with it, and it's going to achieve about 20-meter miss out to 40 kilometers out of a 39 caliber system. And then we're going to deliver 70 kilometers out of the 58 caliber system. So that, I think, is innovative from a technology standpoint. I would also highlight that what the CFT has allowed us to do, also with the Army staff, is when there's innovation that needs to take place of a non-technical nature, we should also be innovative. And so I highlight that the bonus smart submunition, the bonus munition we have already bought. It'll go into inventory in Europe in January of 2019. January 2019, it might not make a lot of sense to this community, but I would highlight that we got our money in May. And so for 9 months, you put a company on contract, you develop the production facility, you finalize the production facility, and you deliver ammunition. That's a pretty rapid turn. And there's an innovation level there that takes place that's not technical. It's more business management. It's acquisition needs. It's a matter of working with the stakeholders that do the funding piece. And I think 9 months is a pretty good turn. So last point I will make is I think what the CFT has allowed us to do is to make sure that there's no seams. So Chris Mills runs the rocket missile stuff. Mike George runs the S&T side for the CFT. There used to be this phrase, the valley of death. Everyone's got to be worried about the valley of death. And I took a look at that and I said, it's not really the valley of death. The valley is a nice natural terrain feature that you look at and everyone admires. Picatinny. Picatinny's in a valley. It's a beautiful valley. And everyone looks at the valley. It's a beautiful valley. Let's admire the valley. No, what we've been facing is a ditch of death that different parts of the Army dig deliberately. Whether it's the S&T community that maybe got a little cheap on the science and technology side and didn't want to buy down risk, or the PMs on the other side that didn't want to accelerate at the right pace and we rushed to milestone B. Well, the XM1113, how we had that failure, we would have had a broken program, or at least a program that had an ugly start. And so one of the benefits of the CFT is you've got the science technology guy, you got the program manager, and then the adult leadership provided by Colonel Rafferty to make sure that all the parts are playing well. And then when we go to the POM review, if it doesn't fit in the Army's modernization strategy, Colonel Rafferty will tell us it doesn't fit, and we'll say, okay, we'll go build something else. We'll work with our contractors to build what the Army needs instead of trying to promote programs that don't fit the strategy. And so I appreciate everybody coming out. I'll turn it over to Mike George, who is our Picatinny brethren and the S&T advisor, and thanks again.
Thank you, Will. So a lot of the things that Will and Chris and Colonel Rafferty mentioned are based on the benefits of the development work and the S&T that we've already come to realize. And so we are establishing those quick wins. We are getting those out there early because we do realize an operational capability that can be provided in the near term. But where are we going in the future? We keep talking about modernization. And so what is modernization? We have to look at what science and technology, what our partners here in industry can help provide. When we start looking at those component technologies, how do we pull those together from an operational standpoint and bring an integrated lethal capability to the warfighter? So I'll take a step back because we're starting to look at more of the future capabilities and where do we want to go. General Townsend made a great point today in capturing what MDO 1.5 is. And as we start looking at this power competition or layers of defense and layers of standoff, we have to be the best in breed at all echelons of the fight. So Colonel Rafferty mentioned the echelons of the fight that we are investing our technology in. But how do we go and make sure that our foundational work is starting to reinvest and reinvigorate where we can go? That's where we need help with our industry partners, as well as looking at the decks, the labs, and academia. And so as we start introducing these capabilities, the video that you saw behind Colonel Rafferty when he was giving his opening remarks looked at some of the prototyping and the experimentation. That's really where the CFT and Army Futures Command has allowed us to bring that to the forefront. We're now informing the future set of requirements. The future set of requirements are now experimenting with these different ideas that we're now prototyping and building from the S&T. So all these pieces are well nested. Partners in crime or partners in cross-functional teaming, we are bringing these pieces together, and we're allowing ourselves to now enable multi-domain operational themes for the Army to now go and build into its force structure context to simulate, to war game, to experiment, and prototype. And so all of these things are coming together quickly. We are putting more money into those game changers. Again, we have component technologies. We can go and invest in advanced energetics, advanced warheads, advanced propulsion, advanced weapon systems, airframes, and so on. And everyone has their niche capability that they bring to the fight. But when you integrate those systems together, that's really where you start looking at that operational overmatch. And so that's where the science and technology, or our partnerships with the research and development community, our industry partners, or even on the acquisition side, as we start looking at bridging that valley or that ditch of death, that's really where we start looking at the inherent benefits of what we can provide in a short amount of time. So with that, I'll get off the stage and turn it back over to Colonel Rafferty or any Any questions and answers?
All right, so we're ready to take any questions, and while you're handing out, I'll make a comment about the science and technology deep dive that we executed last week at Picatinny, hosted by them, but brought the whole community together, and we started to I started to put together my thinking on how we're going to make recommendations on that foundational S&T line at each one of the labs as it relates to this portfolio. And then begin to start thinking about the tough choices we're going to make about programs that aren't necessarily going to contribute or that are getting in the way of us finishing these right now. So that's the last thing. I'm ready for questions.
Good to see you again, sir. Thank you for a really interesting presentation. Cameron Simpson, British Artillery. We too are 39 caliber addicts. We too are looking for that extended range. I'd like to ask a question about the IRCA project. As you get that extended range, you start to need more guidance because the zone opens up. That therefore requires more target information to go into the shells before they leave the turret. What level of automation are you looking at inside that 58 caliber turret in order to deal with that complexity of ammunition?
So I'll take a first whack at that, and that our a role that I'm playing in the IRCA program is to push us towards more autonomous approaches to our artillery systems. It was asked of me a couple of weeks ago whether or not that and I realize our FA commandant's here too, that whether or not our community is ready for autonomous artillery. And I'd say that we actually made that decision years ago with MLRS and HIMARS. And the crew members are in the front cab. They're not manipulating the sights. They're not elevating the LLM or anything. So we're past that. It doesn't mean it wouldn't be disruptive, but I don't think that's really an obstacle, which some may have thought that. But we believe that by the time we get to prototype 4 or 5 or 6, that we'll have some autonomous options in there for us to consider. And as our acquisition executive proposed a week or two ago, he said, in terms of autonomy, artillery is probably the right place to start. It's probably much harder to get there for a direct fire weapon system. For an indirect fire system, it's probably a lot easier. And I just sort of made a comparison to MLRS, which you could make an argument is semi-autonomous, although we've never described it that way. We look at it as a couple ways. One is it makes the turret easier to protect, right? Because you don't have a bunch of crew members in there. It also has a potential as we begin to trust these systems for us to actually be faster and safer and more reliable. So we're going in that direction. We don't have a clear path yet, but we're going that way.
Sir, thanks. And another great point on that point. I think where autonomy goes, but where we start looking at supervised automation from a weapons perspective, there's a lot of themes out there for artificial intelligence and autonomy. But when we start looking at weapons platforms for a crew-intensive or a safety-intensive environment, and you start looking at supervised automation, to be able to allow a platform to go and service multiple targets at a much faster rate by bringing automation in, such as ammunition handling, allows you to be more lethal and survivable on the battlefield. And so we are investing heavily. The CFT and Army Futures Command has helped influence where we go with that roadmap to then go and help support those future combat platforms.
Just one add to that is, I think when you were talking about the automation, some of it has to do with ephemeris data and satellite data and GPS coordinates. So the CFT allowed this infantryman on the CFT, which I'm always fascinated, but I'm a statement of the obvious kind of guy. And when we looked at the intelligence community and their input back to us, a lot of our high-value targets that we're going after have wheels and tracks. And so what we're also learning on is GPS is not the right solution to go after those target sets. And so through the CFT, we've teed up a couple of opportunities to put different sensor packages on cannon artillery and allow it to go after moving and move targets. I don't want to downplay that. I mean, that's a significant shift for a community that probably relied on aviation assets to hit moving targets. And so there's a lot of learning that's going to go on there, and the CFT is a good forum to do that.
Thanks. Hi, Sidney Friedberg, Breaking Defense. Talk to me about the schedule on PRISM. When you actually will have that first unit equipped, and what the spirals are likely to be. We hear things like anti-ship, for example. You mentioned ISR packages. There's the possibility that the INF treaty goes away, and then 499 km is no longer the range you want, and you want options to upgrade that if that happens. So sort of talk to me about what the notional timeline is currently.
I'll start and hand it to Chris. But so our first quarter FY23, so January of 2023, will be an urgent material release of the PRISM missile. Immediately after that, we want to begin to spiral in as quickly as possible these additional capabilities. So. Yes. Yes, a limited quantity of the weapon will be fielded. So it'll be in ammunition bunkers wherever we decide to put them. So the spirals that we're pursuing, you said anti-ship, it's really a cross-domain. And what I mean by cross-domain is it's what it senses, and I'll let Chris get into the specifics on it. But a ship could be a target for it, as an example. So the propulsion spiral is an interesting point, right? Because we're going to the limit of the INF treaty. If that changes, which is a discussion that I'm not part of, if that changes, what we've begun to consider is would there be additional room for more range out of the PRISM missile? The answer is yes. And could that be improved even with additional propulsion technology? The answer to that is yes. So those will be spirals that we consider as well. So I'll turn it over to Chris for a little more programmatic approach.
FY23, as Colonel Rafferty mentioned, it is when we're planning for the urgent material release, and your point was spot on. It's when we get the missile into the hands of the soldier. But what we're trying to do with PRISM is the baseline missile is we're calling it is platform or the bus for future capabilities, and if we do it right and we put the right architecture and have the right interfaces, then we can spiral those in quickly. I use, for example, I worked on the guided MLRS alternative warhead into guided MLRS. That was a replacement of a warhead into an existing missile system. It went through a program of record, took 6 years to do. That's not what we want to do here. What we want to do is to be able to rapidly roll these in, and even while we're building the baseline missile, we're working with the S&T community, and we're pulling industry in with the S&T community so it's not one of those situations where the S&T community develops something, hands it off to industry, and industry completely redesigns it and then hands it over to me to put into the missile. That's unacceptable. We don't have that time. So that's the focus. Propulsion, initially we're looking at additional propulsion technologies that could extend potentially if the INF treaty decision was made that we could go further. We'll look at that, and also not just right now the baseline missile has a fairly conventional propulsion type of capability. I mean, it's similar to guided MLRS, but there's other propulsion technologies out there that may even be a leap ahead. So we look at that as well. And then the moving or move targets, looking at we don't want a one-trick pony that, as you mentioned, goes after maritime assets, but has no application against terrestrial or ground-based assets or radars. So, we're trying to work all these different potential capabilities and look at what's most mature, and then prioritize that so we can get with industry and with our S&T community and do that integration of those spirals as the missile becomes available in the mid-2020s.
And my job is to take what Chris just talked about and what I've learned from industry in our labs over the last 2 months and turn it into a plan for these spirals, in what priority and what order, and to make sure that we're invested properly to reach those quickly. We're happy to take the next question. While we're getting over there, I'll just say that there's one thing that I've a question that I'm starting to ask now in my learning in this job, and it's this: I understand technology readiness levels, I understand the material readiness levels. I don't know how we're measuring integration risk and how we're doing that. So that's something that I'm really focused on. Chris talked about the integration challenges of some of these sensors and things like that, but that's something that I think the CFT has to highlight and address early, so that when it's time to integrate new technology, that we're prepared to do it without unnecessary delays.
Within your cross-functional team, I'm surprised that we don't have loitering and swarming munitions within inside that, considering the ranges are pretty close to the IRCA. Where does that fall within inside the 8 cross-functional teams, and do you guys have a hand to play in that?
So we've looked at the technology and ideas from our industry partners on swarming and loitering munitions, artillery delivered. So it's something that we're addressing in the CFT. It could be one of those spirals. I'm not convinced that we're there yet, but it's definitely something that we want to present as an S&T investment in the future. Yeah. Okay, Sydney.
I've had people give me, we can juggle these too, a plausible explanation for why a hypersonic weapon that skips in and out of atmosphere isn't covered by an F because it's not truly ballistic or truly cruise. I don't think the Russians will buy that, but it's an argument you could make in of international law. How does the cannon-launched munition get through? Is that possibly INF compliant because of how it operates, or is that something we're doing R&D, allowed by the treaty to do R&D on non-compliant systems, but we will only field if, as the ambassador said recently, if we really have to?
We've gotten the initial ruling that we can proceed, and we believe that the cannon will be compliant with the treaty. And there is a way to describe. I don't want to address the technology or the approach to it in this forum, but we're confident in its compliance.
It doesn't follow either a cruise or ballistic flight path as defined with the treaty. Is that the issue, or?
So it's different from hypersonic in the way it meets the treaty limitations, but it does. That's all I really want to say here about that. I think we got time for one more. All right, well, that's it for us, and we'll be around. I think we've got a media event after this, although some of it probably got covered by Sydney here. But thank you again for your time and your interest in the program.